Indian government today expelled a senior Canadian diplomat in a reciprocal move after Canada government also expelled an Indian diplomat, and Canadian PM Justin Trudeau accused India of being involved in the June killing of a Khalistani terrorist. This brings about a serious deterioration in the already testy relationship between the two countries. India has rejected all charges, of course, and also reminded Canada of its concerns of extremist voices against India being given political shelter in Canada. Now, Trudeau said his government had, quote, credible allegations of a potential link between Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing with the agents of the government of India. The Indian government rejected the allegation as absurd and motivated. During a cold meeting between the Indian Prime Minister and Canadian Prime Minister on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Delhi earlier, Narendra Modi had conveyed India's concerns against elements promoting secessionism and violence against Indians, both in India and in Canada. Trade talks between the two countries, remember, have also been paused. Here is more of the Ministry of External Affairs' response to Canada post the latter's allegations. So India has pointed out that these are unsubstantiated allegations which have been leveled to shift focus from Khalistani terrorists and extremists that are being provided shelter in Canada. These Khalistani terrorists, India reiterated, threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The MEA also stated that Canadian government's inaction in this regard has been a long-standing and continuing concern. So who was this Hardeep Singh Nijjar? Now, Nijjar was the head of the Khalistani Tiger Force, and the Khalistani Tiger Force is the Canadian arm of Sikhs for Justice, which is also a pro-Khalistani organization banned in India. Nijjar was shot dead in Surrey in June 2023. He had moved from Jalandhar to Canada in 1997 and was wanted in India for his terror links. So the big question we asked today, with Canada provoking India once again, how should the government respond? Will sending one of their diplomats back be enough, or should India do more? First up, I also want to take the latest that we're getting as far as this story is concerned. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has spoken more on the latest step that they have taken, saying that Canada is not trying to provoke India by suggesting its agents were linked to the murder of a Sikh separatist leader, but wants New Delhi to address the issue properly. So that's the further statement that is coming from the Canadian Prime Minister on this. Remember, when he met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he was also asked about this, and he gave the same response that Canada stands for freedom of expression and protest, although they will not tolerate violence and hatred. With that, let me also go across to our guest joining us. Professor Brahmachaleni is Strategic Affairs expert. Deepak Punj is journalist joining us live from Toronto in Canada. In fact, Deepak is one of those journalists who's been attacked physically by Khalistani supporters in Canada. Deepak, I want to understand from you first up, how is this latest action by the Canadian government being seen or received in Canada?
Thank you, first of all, Shivani, for taking me on air. The situation over here is, first of all, let me tell you that there are 1.5 million Indian diaspora living in all over Canada, and everybody is affected by this kind of, bad relationships with India. India being a kind of superpower and bigger market, Canada should have focused on markets instead of doing politics. This kind of politics. Instead of uniting Indians across Canada, is breaking us. And as Indians, Indo-Canadians, we are very worried because Sikhs and Hindus, we all live together peacefully. We have, our families are together, our values are together, our businesses are together. And this kind of situation creates trouble between us.
Between the
communities.
Mr.
Trudeau should...
But Mr. Trudeau certainly has been accused of, and India has said this openly, of domestic reasons why he continues to be soft on Khalistani elements, many of whom are accused of criminal activity in Canada in the past.
Yes.
I want to understand from you, is this move being seen from his party and his government essentially as a move that will bring more popularity for Mr. Trudeau? Is this fundamentally how it is being received, or do you think there are concerns in Canada's politics too, and amongst politicians too, that this is a bad move for Canada?
This is a bad move for Canada, no doubt. There is a particular lobby behind this that's working 24/7 for all these kind of issues. I will take you a little bit back before, like a few years back, when Trudeau went to India with full delegation, and after when he came to Canada, it was a huge, huge news all over by CSIS by putting Sikh extremism, and Mr. Trudeau gave the same kind of address that time, but it was a big roar all over Canada and in basically Sikh politics in Canada. And Trudeau and Liberal government bound to take back those Sikh extremism words. That means they can put words anytime and they can take back words anytime. We don't know if Mr. Trudeau will take back these words
Okay.
again after some time.
Okay, let me go across to Professor Brahmachaleni as well. Many feel fundamentally Trudeau has done India a favor by acting in such a knee-jerk way and kind of making this such a public spat. He's kind of, made India's job easier to now tighten the screws. And if India was to do that, because India has been very miffed with Canada over its policies and domestic policies hurting India, how should India go about this? Because I'm sure this cannot really rest at expelling a diplomat as a reciprocal move.
The real problem is that Trudeau has political ties with Canadian Sikh radicals. During his tenure in office, he has brought relations with India under increasing strain. Now, these strains have been apparent long before this killing in June created a controversy. Now, with his allegation in the Canadian Parliament, he has created an unusual diplomatic crisis between two major democracies. It's important to note that in his own statement, he mentions allegations.
Yes.
Allegations. There's no evidence. Allegations about potential, not actual India linked to the murder.
Yes.
So why would you make an allegation at this stage when there's not a single suspect in custody? There is no evidence of any kind. And yet he makes an allegation against India, knowing fully well that his statement would bring Canada-India relations under further pressure. If he was wiser, the correct approach would have been to arrest and charge all the suspects, present evidence of alleged Indian involvement in the murder before a court of law. That would have been a wiser approach. Now, he himself admits he is making only an allegation. So I think the whole thing looks, as the External Affairs Ministry rightly says, politically motivated. But the problem is that Canada is not an adversary of India.
Yeah.
So when Trudeau acts unwisely, he brings that relationship under further strain. This is not in Canada's interest, nor is it in India's interest.
So do you think essentially this is a bit of a tantrum because Mr. Trudeau didn't get the kind of treatment that maybe he was hoping for in India, and India was pretty stiff? The press release after Mr. Trudeau's meeting with Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the G20 was as stern a press release as they come. So do you think he's kind of, made a knee-jerk reaction, a bigger reaction that was needed at this stage?
Shivani, the fact is that Trudeau in New Delhi was pressed down by Modi. Modi gave him a good scolding about the fact that Trudeau's government is tolerating growing anti-India activities of Sikh extremists. Modi held a bilateral with all G20 leaders except two, the Chinese Premier and Trudeau. But after the meeting with Trudeau on the sidelines, this was an informal meeting, but not a formal bilateral. It was like, a pull aside. The MEA issued a very hard-hitting statement about what Modi conveyed to the Canadian Prime Minister. Normally the MEA is quite tepid in its statement. So the statement that was issued about the Modi-Trudeau meeting was unusually strong. And that really underscored India's concerns about what's happening in Canada. And now the allegation that Trudeau has made has come just days after the scolding that he got in New Delhi. That it by itself is quite telling. But the more domestic angle is this, that Trudeau is heading a minority government that depends on support from the New Democratic Party leader, Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh is a known pro-Khalistani. He, as a lawyer, has defended Sikh militants fighting for Khalistan. And in the past, he has even participated in pro-Khalistan events, including in a Khalistan rally in San Francisco.
Right.
Now, when your government is dependent for survival on Jagmeet Singh, a Khalistani, obviously, you're encouraging other Khalistanis in Canada. This is what's happening.
Yeah, but is this the wisest thing to do for Canada? As you said, this is not good for either Canada or for India. Of course, India doesn't want unfriendly relationship with Canada, but it also has to draw a line. Deepak, I want to come back to you. You know, there are some jokes also going around on how the Canadian Prime Minister referred to Nijjar as the Canadian citizen. And, you know, how by doing so, you know, he's kind of presented his government in worse light because, you know, Nijjar's past is for everybody to know. And even his entry into Canada and how he continued to stay in Canada is quite a tale in itself.
Yes, there are so many people who took asylum and refuge from India. You know, this is like everybody knows that so many people are coming from there, and then they tear off their passport and then they apply for asylum. But after that, there are so many other agencies involved in this. There are so many, you know, people that mingle around with each other, and they become anti-India, and then they start, you know, doing bad mouthing about India. Even when they apply for Canadian citizenship, they have to get clearance from the consulate office, and I don't know how they are getting all these things, but you know, this is the major concern. People who took asylum and who took refuge in Canada by giving like bad mouthing India become you know, national leaders
State guests almost
in Canadian politics.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
that's really bad.
I also want to ask you very quickly, do you feel that this is essentially a move that is going to embolden these elements even further? And as you mentioned, this is becoming a concern for the peaceful Indian diaspora in Canada, because these Khalistani elements have been trying to drive a wedge between the Hindu and the Sikh community in Canada as well. They threaten Indian diplomats in Canada and also make calls for violence in India. And it seems like, you know, the Canadian government is not drawing a line. In fact, I should mention there's a political leader who's been shot at in one of Indian states. And actually, one of the associates of Nijjar sitting in Canada has taken ownership of that murder. So while all of that is happening, the Canadian authorities are completely, you know, sidestepping that, turning a blind eye and not acting on any of these elements who have criminal cases against them as well.
For sure. But over here, the thing is, Mr. Trudeau and Liberal parties all-time low in numbers, because elections will be coming soon, and this is just to boost up, you know, 905 ridings and many ridings with Indian diaspora. With the Sikh voters, almost, you know, almost more than 25 seats or more than 30 seats, they have a big hand in win-win situation or lose-lose situation. So, because Mr. Trudeau and Liberal Party is all-time low, I think that's one of the reasons.
Well, but is that a good enough reason to take your relationship with a country down the hill like this? That's not what you do for domestic politics and for party politics. You don't really endanger your relationship with a country like India. I have a minute left, Professor Brahmachaleni. How do you think India should take this forward? Is this now time for India to respond in a bigger manner and not just let it rest at the expelling of a Canadian diplomat? Should India escalate this any further?
Well, first, Trudeau's evidence-free allegation against India is not just shocking. It threatens to further corrode Canada's relations with the world's fastest-growing major economy. Repairing the damage to the bilateral relationship may take time, but it may have to wait until there's a change of government in Ottawa. But on the issue of this guy, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, how many people know him? I didn't know about this guy until controversy erupted about him after his murder. There are all these well-known UN-designated terrorists that are thumping their noses at India, like Hafiz Saeed, like Masood Azhar. Nobody has ever accused Indian intelligence of taking down any UN designated terrorists. Why would India kill somebody who posed no real threat to India? This is ridiculous. The whole allegation against India, not only is it evidence-free, it's absurd, because Nijjar was an obscure figure. He may have headed some Sikh separatist group. There's so many small groups that various Sikh militants have established.
Yeah.
Certainly, Nijjar was of no consequential value to India.
Exactly.
He was no threat to Indian security. So why would Indian intelligence, as Trudeau is alleging,
go out of its way to take him down? So that again is pointing out to the same thing that you gentlemen have been pointing out, that is this worth endangering your relationship with India? Is this a fit that Justin Trudeau is throwing, effectively endangering his country's relationship with another important country? And will there be a rethink on their part is the big question. I've run out of time. I do thank Professor Brahma Chaleni and Deepak Punj for joining us on this big story.